You can make six figures and still feel broke. Not broke on paper, broke in the way that matters when life goes sideways. If your income looks impressive, but your savings account would not survive a 3-month emergency, your problem is not income. Your problem is the system wrapped around your income. The Federal Reserve documented this in the Survey of Consumer Finances. For households earning between $100,000 and $149,000, the top quintile of U.S. earners, the median liquid asset balance was just $29,000, not net worth, liquid cash. Move up to the $150,000 to $199,000 bracket, and the median is $52,000. That is roughly 4 months of gross runway before complete structural collapse. That is the Henry class, high earner, not rich yet. The label sounds temporary. The data suggests it often is not, because this is not really about discipline. It is about architecture. Retail systems, fintech UI, financing models, subscriptions, upgrade cycles, all of it is built to convert a high income into a predictable outflow. This is a forensic teardown of those systems and the countermeasures that stop them. Principle 1. The total cost model. The first trap is simple. They train you to look at the entry price, not the real price. The sticker, the monthly payment, the headline APR. That is the frame. And once your brain accepts that frame, it stops asking the expensive question, what will this actually cost me over time? Take a $38,000 SUV financed over 60 months at a 7.5% APR, which experience data shows was the average new car rate in 2024. Most buyers fixate on one number, the $762 monthly payment. But the arithmetic tells a different story. Over the loan term, total interest adds $7,720. According to the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, full coverage insurance adds an average of $1,759 annually. AAA's driving costs study tracks routine maintenance and repairs at another $1,200 a year for the first 3 seasons. Add registration, fuel, and first-year depreciation, which cuts 15 to 25% off the asset's value immediately, and that $38,000 vehicle is really a 5-year commitment between $68,000 and $76,000. So the sticker price was never the cost, it was the admission fee. The countermeasure is non-negotiable. Before you deploy capital, run a total cost of ownership model. Acquisition price, maintenance, insurance, storage, and opportunity cost over the useful life. If the purchase only works when you ignore those numbers, it is not an asset, it's a leak. Principle 2. Capital efficiency. Every purchase, stripped of lifestyle branding, is the same question. How much real utility do I get per dollar committed? Run that on a $32,000 recreational boat, a conservative entry point for that asset class. Per Boat US member survey data, average annual carrying costs, storage at roughly $150 per month for dry storage in a mid-tier market, insurance at approximately $1,200 to $2,500 annually, depending on hull value, registration, routine maintenance at the industry rule of 10% of hull value per year, and winterization, total between $5,500 and $8,000 annually. Now look at usage. According to the National Marine Manufacturers Association, the median boat owner uses their vessel between 11 and 15 days per year. At 13 days and $6,750 in annual carrying costs, the capital efficiency is roughly $519 per use day before the initial $32,000 is even amortized. For a depreciating asset with a 15 to 20-year useful life under average care, the fully amortized per-use cost is closer to $750 to $900. Now flip the lens. A quality mattress, $1,600 to $2,200 for a mid-range product from a reputable manufacturer, used 365 nights per year over an expected 8 to 10-year lifespan, produces a per-use cost of 44 cents to 75 cents per night. And that purchase influences 6 to 8 hours of recovery, cognitive function, cortisol regulation, and cardiovascular health every day you own it. That is capital efficiency. The pattern is clear. Assets used rarely are almost always overpriced for the utility they produce. Frequency of use is not a detail, it is the main variable. Principle 3. The inventory audit. A huge amount of consumer spending survives on one bias: sunk cost psychology. You keep the thing not because it is useful, but because getting rid of it would force you to admit the purchase was bad. It is easier to leave the treadmill in the garage than to sell it for $200 and acknowledge the $900 purchase was a miss. That instinct is so common it built an industry. The U.S. self-storage industry generates over $40 billion in annual revenue that exists largely because Americans own more than their homes can physically hold. And the cost is not just financial. Research published in Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin by Saxby and Repetti 2010 found a statistically significant correlation between residential density of possessions and elevated diurnal cortisol profiles in female homeowners. So the clutter costs money, and it costs physiology. The tool here is binary. For every retained asset, ask, if I did not already own this, would I spend money to buy it today? If the answer is no, you are not keeping it for utility. You're keeping it for loss aversion, and that means it's still extracting value from you. Principle 4. Upgrade culture. Consumer tech perfected a powerful extraction system: make a functioning product feel obsolete before it actually is. The iPhone is the cleanest example. A 12-month hardware release cadence trains consumers to interpret comparative inferiority as functional failure. But most devices are not failing, they're being replaced early. Consumer Intelligence Research Partners data shows the average U.S. consumer replaces their smartphone every 26 to 34 months, often while the prior device is still fully functional. At an average flagship price of $950 to $1,100 in 2024, the annualized cost of a 30-month replacement cycle is approximately $380 to $440 per year. Now scale that logic beyond phones, vehicles, appliances, furniture, replacements driven by aesthetic obsolescence instead of real failure. Conservative modeling suggests the average U.S. household spends $4,200 to $7,800 annually on voluntary replacement of non-failed assets. Over a 30-year earning horizon, that's $126,000 to $234,000 deployed for zero net utility gain. The lever being pulled here is not greed, it is status sensitivity. The countermeasure is a functional sufficiency threshold. Keep the asset until it fails to do its job. Boredom is not failure. Newer is not failure. A better version existing somewhere else is not failure. Principle 5. Friction engineering. This may be the most underreported extraction system in modern consumer finance: digital friction removal. Behavioral design, persuasive technology, dark patterns, whatever label you prefer, is used everywhere now. E-commerce, subscriptions, consumer fintech, retail apps. The goal is straightforward: make spending happen before deliberate thought shows up. Amazon's one-click purchasing is the classic example.
Removing the 45-second manual card entry process did not just make checkout easier, it removed the last natural hesitation point in the transaction. The patent Amazon held on that system from 1999 to 2017 was, in effect, a patent on reducing consumer self-control friction. Buy now, pay later does the same thing through price fragmentation. A $480 item shown as 4 payments of $120 is not neutral formatting, it is behavioral design. Research published in the Journal of Marketing Research found that installment framing consistently increases willingness to pay and reduces purchase regret relative to lump sum framing. Then there are push notifications. According to Airship's 2023 Push Notification Benchmark Report, the average U.S. smartphone user receives between 46 and 63 push notifications per day. Retail and e-commerce apps take a disproportionate share of that volume. Timed, tested, and personalized to catch you when self-control is weakest. That is not convenience, that is targeting. So restore friction on purpose. Remove saved payment credentials. That 45-second reinsertion delay is a checkpoint. Delete retail apps from your primary screen tier. Disable retail push notifications at the OS level. And impose a 48-hour delay protocol on all unplanned purchases above a chosen threshold. Multiple consumer behavior studies, including work published in the Journal of Consumer Research, consistently find that over 70% of unplanned purchase intent does not survive a 24 to 48-hour cooling window. On the savings side, use the same logic in reverse. Automate transfers to savings and investment accounts the same business day your paycheck clears, not later, the day it arrives. That is not budgeting, that is architecture. Principle 6. The novelty premium. Never be the first owner of your own enthusiasm. A lot of expensive purchases are not driven by proven utility, they are driven by identity excitement. The neuroscience is well established. Anticipated rewards trigger dopamine in the nucleus accumbens before the reward is even received, which means the fantasy of becoming a cyclist, a woodworker, or a landscape photographer can feel almost identical to the reward of actually doing the thing. That is why people buy gear before they build the habit. The good news is the rental economy gives you a clean test. REI, most outdoor equipment chains, and a growing number of specialty retailers now offer rentals across categories. A full camping setup rents for approximately $40 to $85 for a weekend. Cycling gear, ski gear, and water sports equipment are widely available in similar ranges. 2 to 3 rental sessions after the novelty has started to wear off roughly cost $150 to $250. If the interest sticks, great. If it does not, that's the entire tuition. The alternative is usually $800 to $3,500 spent on gear tied to a temporary neurological spike. Rent first, buy after reality. Principle 7. The subscription stack. Between 2015 and 2024, the consumer economy shifted hard toward recurring revenue. Software did it first, then everything else copied it. Streaming, fitness, storage, food, clothing, automotive features, financial tools. The danger is not any single charge, it's the invisibility of the stack. A 2022 C+R research survey found the average U.S. consumer estimated their monthly subscription spend at $86, while the actual calculated figure was $219. That's a gap of approximately 2.5 to 3x. Over a year, that becomes a $2,628 discrepancy between perceived and actual outflow. Why does this work? Because each line item sits below the brain's alarm threshold, $9.99, $14.99, $17.99. Small enough to ignore, persistent enough to compound.
The fix is quarterly, not emotional. Export 12 months of bank and credit card statements, identify every recurring charge, then ask one question: have I actively used it in the prior 30 days? If not, cancel it. The average household that has not done this in more than 12 months will usually find between 3 and 7 subscriptions still renewing for services not being actively used. At an average of $14 per subscription, that is $504 to $1,176 in annual outflow for zero utility. That is not careless spending. That is billing architecture designed to profit from inattention. Principle 8. Hedonic adaptation. Here's the cruel part. Higher income does not automatically feel like relief because the brain adapts. Hedonic adaptation is not pop psychology. It is a replicated finding in cognitive neuroscience and behavioral economics, documented by Brickman and Campbell 1971 and extended by Lubomirsky, Sheldon, and Schade. The mechanism is baseline recalibration. What feels like progress at first eventually feels normal. That is why raises disappear. The Federal Reserve's SCF data shows this at scale. Median liquid asset balances across income quintiles do not rise proportionally with income. Top quintile earners do not hold 5x the liquid assets of median earners. They hold closer to 2.5 to 3x, despite earning significantly more. The lifestyle expands.
The pressure stays. So if your savings rate is 20% of gross income at $85,000, the rule is to maintain or increase that percentage at $110,000. You decide that before the first paycheck arrives, not after, because "I'll see how it feels" is exactly how hedonic adaptation wins. Wealth accumulates in the gap between income and lifestyle. Adaptation is what tries to close that gap. Principle 9. Liquidity is optionality. Most people obsess over net worth. Not enough people obsess over liquidity, because liquidity is not just emergency cash, it is optionality. The person making $160,000 in gross compensation with $3,000 in liquid assets has almost no real flexibility. They cannot absorb much more than approximately 30 days of disruption without debt, forced liquidation, or panic. They cannot credibly walk away from a bad job. They cannot take a calculated risk. Their income is high, but their freedom is low. The person earning $75,000 with 14 months of living expenses in liquid savings and a modest investment portfolio has far more leverage. They can leave a toxic environment. They can absorb a $15,000 unexpected expense without structural damage. They can move because they choose to, not because they are cornered. That is what savings really buy you, not just future compounding, but present tense negotiating power. Every dollar tied up in a consumption liability, a lease, installment debt, a subscription, an asset with high carrying costs, is a dollar removed from optionality capital.
Principle 10. The review cadence. One big financial reset every once in a while does not work. It is the money version of crash dieting. The problem is not one dramatic mistake. It is drift, small defaults, left unreviewed, compounding quietly. So the answer is cadence. Weekly, a 2-minute scan of inflows and outflows, not deep analysis, just awareness. Monthly, review one spending category through the capital efficiency lens. Quarterly, check net liquid assets, savings rate versus target, recurring charges, and any new financial commitments. Annual, run a full statement, net worth, investment performance against benchmark, and a written, operationalized commitment for the coming year. The goal is not insight for its own sake. Insight without execution infrastructure is useless. The goal is to keep control of the system before the system starts controlling you. Because most Henry failure is not catastrophic, it is cumulative. The Henry trap is not about income, it is about design. The modern consumer economy is built to turn earnings into outflow with extreme efficiency. Financing obscures total cost. Upgrade cycles create artificial obsolescence. Fintech removes friction. Subscriptions hide fixed costs in plain sight, and hedonic adaptation makes every raise feel temporary. So these 10 principles are not self-help, they are countermeasures. Use total cost before acquisition. Use capital efficiency before deployment. Restore friction where spending is too easy. Automate savings the day income lands. Lock in an expenditure ceiling before lifestyle inflation gets there first. If you do only 2 things after this, do these. First, automate a savings transfer for the day your next paycheck clears, today, before this video ends. Second, run a subscription audit this week by exporting 90 days of bank statements and matching every recurring charge against actual usage. Those 2 actions alone can change your liquid asset position within 60 days. Everything else is the longer game. If this is the kind of analysis you want, subscribe. 1 video per week. No product recommendations, no sponsored content, no motivational framing, just the mechanics.